Hi guys, welcome back to my channel for another video. Today's video we're gonna prep a bunch of things for the next week. It'll be mostly dinners, but I'm also prepping a lunch and we're gonna make a syrup for my coffee as well. The first thing we're starting with is we're gonna make focaccia, because one day's dinner will be a focaccia sandwich. We're going to make pesto to go with it, and it's going to be pesto. We do some deli, some beef fry or bacon, which as a kosher consumer we don't do bacon, so it's cut off from the cow. It's beef that mimics bacon, and then I add avocado. So those are delicious sandwiches. So we're working on the focaccia now. So while we're doing this, I'll tell you what else we're going to be making. So we took out my bowl. I'm going to start off with active starter. I'm also working on a bunch of other projects, so you saw the mess behind me. Then that's because I already started working on some of the projects. And last night we had a last minute family barbecue, and after that I didn't feel like cleaning, so there's a mess from that too. Now I'm not sure in what order I'll be making all of these dinners, so I'll just tell you everything. No, there's nothing new. So I'll just tell you the meals that we're prepping for, and if you want to see how I bring all of those meals together, that will be in a separate video. So if you want to see that, stay tuned, hit subscribe, so you'll know when the next one comes out. So we're going to make the focaccia, which we are working on right now. We're adding 360 grams of water. I'm going to mix this together. And for those sandwiches, I'm also going to make some pesto, which unfortunately I don't have pesto coming out of the garden yet. So I have to buy basil. I don't have basil coming out of the garden yet. Pesto doesn't grow. One day I'm gonna have chicken with mashed potatoes, just like a classic go-to dinner. So I think I'm going to bread the chicken like that. On the day of, I just need to fry it. Now I need bread flour. And we're gonna do 450 grams of this. Another day we're going to have chicken sandwiches. So I'm going to make sourdough buns. And that is a longer process than the focaccia. So later today I'm going to feed the starter again. And we're going to make the dough. We're going to let it sit overnight, and then tomorrow morning we're going to shape it and bake it. And I can also bread the chicken for those, which I believe you guys have also seen me make it already. It's a spicy chicken. I'm also going to add 50 grams of whole wheat flour. After that, another dinner that we're going to be having is a pretzel chicken sandwich. I don't know if I should bread the chicken for it though, because that's not a fried chicken. That will be a baked one, and I don't know how it'll do in the freezer and how it'll bake up afterwards. But we can start the pesto that we're making for our focaccia sandwiches. Will be good for that too, because we need pesto for the salad dressing. I added 10 grams of salt, and I like to use Himalayan salt for any type of bread that I make. Then for lunch, I'm gonna roast some sweet potatoes. We're gonna make a sweet potato feta salad, which I have some lettuce from the garden that I harvested yesterday for the family dinner. And I had put any leftovers in the fridge, and we can use that. And I also bought some lettuce in the store, because between the chicken salad and this sweet potato feta salad, I didn't think the garden will have enough yet. In a few weeks, I would have enough for 2, 3, 4 salads a week. But right now, I do not. So we're combining this, and the recipe says to mix it for 5 minutes, everything together. I usually don't until I feel like it. And the last thing I said we're going to make is a brown sugar syrup. I like alternating the types of coffees that I make for myself. So in the summer, I like to do iced coffee. And right now, my favorites are cold brew that I do with a chocolate hazelnut flavored light roast coffee, which I believe I've shown you guys already before how I make it. I basically just do 2 tablespoons of the ground coffee for every 6 ounces of water. I let it sit overnight to 24 hours. I shake it every so often as I walk past. And then after 24 hours, I filter out any of the coffee grounds and I stay with a beautiful cold brew. That I just make with a sweetener of choice, ice, and a little bit of milk. And my new go-to has become a brown sugar iced, shaken brown sugar iced latte. I don't remember the exact wording of the name. I can look it up for you. It's an iced brown sugar shaken espresso. It's a Starbucks copycat. So I make the syrup for it. And then every morning when I want the coffee, or every afternoon when I want it, I just prep the coffee and I have the syrup ready for me. I don't have to make it every single time. I think that this is as good as I'll get it, or as good as my patients will let me get it. So what we're going to do is we're going to cover it. I'm going to set a 45-minute timer. And I believe that you've also seen me make this focaccia the first time I made it. I did it for a sourdough video. But over here you'll get to see how I incorporate it into a week of dinners and dinner plans and what I'm going to make with it. Okay, we're going to set this aside and I'll see you guys in 45 minutes. Okay, so it's been 45 minutes. We're going to do our first stretch and fold. I like to get my hands a little bit wet, prevent some of the sticking, and all you do is lift up and drop. So you can go under the dough, lift up a section, stretch it, drop it. Turn the bowl, do that again. I'm going to cover it and we'll see you again in 30 minutes. Okay, it's been 30 minutes. We're going to do another set of stretch and folds with my hands again. I'm going to do the same thing again. And you can already see a difference, huge difference, in how this dough is looking and how it's feeling. We're going to do this one more time. We're going to set another 30-minute timer. We're going to do another set of stretch and folds exactly like this. I'm going to show you so you can see, again, the difference in the dough of just what time does to it. Okay, we are now ready for our last stretch and fold. And this is so beautiful right now. You can see the elasticity in the dough, how much I can stretch it, and how smooth the dough is looking. So after this stretch and fold, we're going to let this rest for 3 to 4 hours until this dough is grown and it's nice and bubbly. And then we'll be able to move on to the next step. Okay, so our focaccia is ready for the next step. And today was a lot more hectic than I thought. And during the day, I didn't get to do more of this prep work that I was telling you guys about. So I'm gonna hopefully get to do that after dinner. Now is dinner time. So I'm gonna start by getting a little bit of olive oil on here. And I'm gonna brush it to cover the entire paper. And I'm just gonna use my hand because I'm gonna get my hands oily anyways. Now we're gonna get this dough and transfer it onto this parchment paper lined pan. It does say to use a 9x13. I think this is a little bit bigger, but this is what I've been using and I think it's the perfect size. So now with my oily hands, which I'm going to try to get a little bit more oil on here, a little bit more oil, I'm going to flatten it out a little bit. And that also gets just the top of our focaccia covered in oil. Now let me wash my hands. And we're going to cover this with some plastic wrap and a towel. We're going to let this rest for an hour and then we'll come back to it again. Our focaccia here has rested for an hour. My oven has preheated to 425. So now we can get this ready for baking. And I actually forgot to feed my starter earlier to make the burger buns. So we're gonna have to do that next. So now we're gonna drizzle a little bit more oil here, a little bit more in my hand. Specifically my fingers. And we're gonna push down with all 10 fingers and push the dough out the most possible to fill up the pan. Make some nice dimples. Wash your hands. And this will bake on 425 for 35 to 40 minutes. I'll probably just do 35 minutes. Let me get out my starter so we can feed it. Because we are prepping this for next week. I'm going to put it into the freezer. I'm going to want to reheat it. So I'm going to underbake it so that I can bake it then. Now, for the sourdough starter for the buns. Now, I know that I usually, if you've been here before and you've seen me do the sourdough, which you saw when I made the focaccia, I usually have the sourdough starter in a bigger jar. But that became very messy and dirty. And so I transferred it into a jar so that I can get that one cleaned. So we're going to use this one now. And we need to add the flour in here. So all I'm doing to feed my starter is equal amounts of flour and water. I add 51 grams of water. 52, that's okay. I'm going to mix this together. And my starter is usually good after 4 hours. And it better be because now it's already 7:45. That means that I won't be making this dough until 12 o'clock tonight. But usually tonight, it's Thursday today. And usually Thursday I'm up late anyway, so that won't be a problem. But I probably won't be talking to you, so you'll hear how I make it over voiceover. Now usually I would put this starter into my oven with a bread-proof setting on. I don't cover it all the way. But because I have the focaccia in there now, I'll just leave it next to the oven so it gets that warmth and it activates faster. And let me set a timer so that I remember to do it. Okay, perfect. Hey guys, so it's been a little while. This has come out of the oven and I think it's actually ready to be put into the freezer. So I'm gonna wrap it up in saran wrap. And I actually got a beautiful color, even though we only did it for the 35 minutes and not the full 40. I am going to wrap it up in plastic wrap because I don't have a bag big enough to put this into. I think I'll cut another piece this length. I'm gonna leave it on the paper too, so that when I reheat it, I don't need to use another paper. I think I'll bring in the sides first. This is now ready for the freezer. And now our starter is growing. We'll put it back in a warm spot. But until that is fully ready for us, I think the next thing we'll do is we're going to roast our sweet potatoes, because that will need time to bake and then cool before I can put it away. So let me see what temperature I need to put it at so that I can preheat my oven. My phone is a little bit slow today. It's not responding to my touch right away. 400, so let me turn that on. Okay, I've got a cutting board out. Sweet potatoes that I washed and dried. And I'm just getting a knife. Now this is going to be cut into very small cubes. I'm cutting off the ends. Those are not my favorite parts of the sweet potato. I've got my bowl of scraps. So I like to usually cut one side down so that it'll lay flat. And then it's a lot easier to cut. Got a baking sheet. I'm going to line it with parchment paper. So I cut these pretty small. They are like 1/2 inch cubes. And I think they're going to be perfect in the salad. Okay, I think this is the only veggie prep I need to do. So we can put this away. Now for this, all we need to do is a drizzle of olive oil along with a little bit of salt and some pepper. I'm going to toss this, and once the oven reaches temperature, this will go into the oven for like 20 to 25 minutes. Okay, so while we're waiting for this, I'm going to take out 4 jars, because I think I'm going to store them in jars to eat them from. Or I think I'll actually do it in these containers so I can eat it straight from in this. And I won't have to use a plate or a bowl to eat it from. So I think we're going to start with the vinaigrette on the bottom. Okay, our oven is ready. Bringing the cutting board back. Okay, so the recipe calls for the juice of 2 limes. Sorry. So we're going to squeeze 1/2 a lime into each of these containers. Okay, next it calls for a 1/4 cup of olive oil. If you don't know the conversions, a 1/4 cup is 4 tablespoons. So I'm going to do 1 tablespoon per container. Next, it calls for a tablespoon of honey. So I'll just do a little bit in each, a little bit less than a teaspoon. Next up, we need a teaspoon of Dijon mustard. So I'll just do a little squirt in each. And then some salt and pepper to taste. gonna mix this together a little bit. For this part, it probably would have been easier to do it in a jar so that you can shake it to combine. Or just make the dressing in a separate bowl and then divide it between your 4 containers if you're doing it as meal prep. Let me put these in the garbage because I'm gonna crumble my cheese on there. Okay, we did a little switcheroo here. And we're gonna do, the recipe says 1/2 cup of crumbled feta cheese, but I'm just gonna use whatever I have in here. I bought this for something else and I wanna use it before it goes bad. And I love sweet potato, so I figured this is a great meal prep for me. And I'm just cutting the cube in quarter and I'm gonna crumble this into the dressing, and this is gonna flavor the feta cheese. Delicious. Which I should probably have put the sweet potatoes on the bottom, but because I'm prepping this right now and the sweet potatoes just went into the oven, we're gonna do this first. Now the recipe calls for 1/4 cup of pistachios, shelled and roughly chopped. I see that I do have, I was just going to use whatever nuts I have, but I see that I do have some pistachios. So I am going to chop it up, I guess. This is about 1/4 cup, I'd say. Let's sprinkle that in. Now it calls for mixed greens, but that I don't want to put directly on the dressing. I don't want it to become soggy. So I am going to cover this for now. I'm going to set it in the fridge. And once the potatoes come out and are cooled, we'll add that in and then top it with our lettuce. So did I say I have some lettuce from my garden and then some spring mix that I'll add to this. Okay, what is next? Okay, I can start working on the pesto. So first thing for that, I'm getting out my basil. And what I like to do, the easiest way for me to clean this, is that I have my basil here. Wow, I didn't see such nice basil in a while from the store. So this is amazing. So I like to remove the leaves. I put it into my salad spinner. I like to de-stem all the good looking leaves, which today it looks like it's going to be 99% of them. And this pesto will be used for 2 of our recipes coming up. So if you want to see how I use it, hit subscribe, because one of my next videos will be me cooking up these dinners that we're prepping for and eating the lunches that I'm making. So if you want to hear how I like the salad and how, what else am I making new? I think just the salad is new. Everything else we've had before, but if you haven't seen me make it and you want to know how we like these things, follow along. Oh, I can't wait to have basil from the garden and make this fresh. I used up my pesto from last year. Just a couple months ago, actually. I made a bunch of pesto last summer and I froze it. And it was the easiest thing. When I wanted to use it, I would just take it out of the freezer a few minutes before, and it didn't take long to defrost. And it was such a pleasure to have homegrown fresh pesto ready to go whenever we wanted it. Okay, these over here are starting to look sad. Okay, so all of this that's left can be added to our chicken bowl. And now I'm gonna fill this up with water. I'm gonna let it soak for a little bit. Now that that's done, we're gonna bread chicken. So let me pull up the recipe. Actually, no, the first one I won't pull up a recipe for, because that one is one that I know from memory. And this is just a classic breaded fried chicken cutlet. So we're going to start off with 2 eggs. For spices, we're going to add a little bit of salt. Oh, I probably should have done a bigger bowl because this will be full cutlets, but we're going to work with it. Some pepper, onion powder, garlic powder, paprika, a little bit of pepper flakes, and some soy sauce. I'm using coconut aminos today because this is what I have in the house right now. Before I beat this up, our sweet potatoes are ready. Actually, no, it can use a few more minutes. So let me set this aside. And I got a plate out. That will be for our dry mixture, which is just going to be, I'm debating between cornflake crumbs or panko. So I have my chicken here. Put this aside. I'm gonna get some cornflake crumbs over here. I like to leave it out and have it ready in case I need more. All of my baking pans are in use, so I have one of my giant ones here. I'm gonna have to move everything over a little bit. I'm gonna cover this baking sheet with some parchment paper, and we're gonna do both of our chickens. We're gonna let them freeze on here. So I'm gonna need my scissors, chicken shears, for the other set of chickens that I'm making. So I'm using this to open up the package. So half of the tray will be breaded with this mixture. So we put it first into the egg mixture, let the extra drip off, and then into the crumbs. And I like to keep one hand wet, one hand dry. Minimizes the mess on my hands. And a deeper bowl would be better for this. But I've had a busy baking and cooking day, and all of my bowls are, I mean, they're clean, but they're stacked on my counter, air drying. I don't want to put everything away right now. So we're doing it this way. I think I'm gonna have to get it out for the other chicken though. We'll see. I'm quickly gonna bread the last 2 chickens because our sweet potatoes are done. I don't feel like having to wash my hands twice. So let me quickly wash my hands and clean this up. Okay, I've got our sweet potatoes here, looking beautiful. I am going to remove it from the pan straight onto the cooling rack so that it cools off a little bit faster so that we can finish off those salads. And I'm not up all night waiting for this to cool. So now that we got this done, we can get going on our next chicken. Okay, our basil has soaked long enough, so I drained the water. And I'm just gonna spin it in the salad spinner to get rid of the water. I'm gonna drain it a few times and spin it a few times until it is mostly dry. And now my phone is almost dying, and the recipe that I need is on my phone. So let's plug that in and make sure that I can use it. Okay, for this one, we're gonna cut our chicken cutlets in half. So I can do both the dry and the wet mixture in these bowls over here. For the wet mixture, I'm gonna start with an egg, a 1/3 cup of water, and the 1/3 cup of hot sauce. And yeah, like I predicted, this isn't enough, but I have another bottle in my backstock. Okay, we're gonna beat this to combine. For our dry mixture, we need a 3/4 cup of panko crumbs, 3/4 cup of flour, and 1.5 teaspoon of cornstarch. And then we'll move on to our spices. Oh, I hope I have more cayenne pepper. I don't think I have cayenne. So I guess I'll just use what I have. And these won't be as spicy as they usually are. No, no cayenne. Okay. We'll have to go without it. We need 1.5 teaspoon of salt, 4 teaspoons of cayenne pepper, which this is definitely less. So I'm just gonna pour the whole thing in. I need a 3/4 teaspoon of pepper. Maybe I'll just do a whole teaspoon because compensate a little bit for the missing cayenne. 2¼ teaspoon of onion powder and 1.5 teaspoons of garlic powder. I'm gonna leave this out to write down that I need more. Actually, let me do it right now so that I don't leave a mess out. I'm gonna mix this dry mixture together. Actually, let me spin my basil again. Now for these, we're gonna cut each of the chicken breasts in half. And we're gonna dip it first in the dry mixture, wet, and then dry again. So I'm gonna do first is cut all of the chicken. And just like before, one hand is wet, one hand is dry. And once they've been coated twice in the dry mixture, we can add it to our baking sheet to be flash frozen together with the other chicken. And usually when I do this, this is what happens. From all the cayenne pepper in the air. Now the recipe that I'm using for this actually calls for this amount of breading for 2 chickens, 2 chicken cutlets. I use thin cutlets and I manage to coat 5 cutlets usually. But if your cutlets are bigger, then I would suggest doubling at least the crumb mixture. The liquid mixture usually I can stretch more. Today for some reason I have very little crumbs. But this is how I manage to use it up. And not having to double this mixture. It doesn't quite come up on the top, but by doing that I managed to coat the bottom. And then I'll flip it over. And wow, today we're using every last little bit. Like that we get both sides coated. Okay, we clean this up. Look at this beautifully breaded chicken. We're gonna get these into the freezer to flash freeze, and then we'll get them into a bag. Okay, so I got busy with other stuff, but we are back with our dry basil now. I'm gonna transfer all of this into the food processor over here. I would say this is probably 1.5 to 2 cups of basil. And I just very much go by feel, but I'm just trying to give you measurements if you want to make this at home. So I would add, this is probably the equivalent of 6 garlic. We'll add in another garlic to make it 7. Now the classic nut to use for basil pesto is pine nuts. If you don't want to use it, you can substitute any other nut. I'm doing probably 1/2 cup of pine nuts. Then I'm adding salt. It's probably 1.5 to 2 tablespoons. And last is pepper. Okay, it's struggling because the battery is dying. I'd say it's maybe like 1/2 tablespoon of black pepper. Now we're gonna turn this on and blend. While it's blending, we're also gonna drizzle in some oil. Let me bring this up so you can see what I'm doing. And I'm gonna add oil until I like the consistency of it. Gonna scrape down the sides. And we're gonna let this blend up until all of the basil is very fine, because right now there's still quite a bit of chunks. And I think I have enough oil. I'm not gonna add more. Yes, beautiful. Look at this gorgeous pesto. So I'm going to get all of this into a jar and into the fridge, and then we have another component ready. Now this will be used for two things. I believe I said that already. It's going to be used as a dressing for our focaccia sandwiches, and they're going to be used for our salad dressing. And if there's any leftovers after that, we will just enjoy it with eggs or with bread or with anything. Maybe pizza. We didn't make basil pizza in a long time. Not basil pizza, pesto pizza. Okay, now I believe that our sweet potatoes are cool enough now. So we are going to open all of these up. Now we're going to get a little bit of the sweet potato into each of these containers. I'm going to make sure that all of the dressing is covered so that the lettuce doesn't touch it. And I probably would have done better in the jars instead of these containers. I'm too far in now to change it. Okay, now here I have the lettuce from my garden. I'm just going to grab a handful of this and tear it as I'm adding it into the container here. These lettuces are 3 or 4 different varieties that I have growing in my garden right now. And I'm going to top them all off with a little bit of spring mix as well. Beautiful lunch, ready to go. All I need to do when I want to eat it, take it out of the fridge, shake it, and it'll be ready to eat. Yum. Okay, these chickens have been in the freezer now for a little bit. So now, I'm just going to get them into some bags. And these will be ready to be fried up. Now, usually when I make more than one day's worth of chicken and I bread it in advance, I would put them in a pan with parchment paper layered in between the layers so that I can take out however many pieces I need for that night and I don't have to defrost all of it. Okay, let me see what else needs to happen. So now we're still waiting for our sourdough starter. We have like another 25 minutes. So now we're going to make the brown sugar syrup for the coffee. So for this brown sugar syrup, I am doubling the recipe. So I'm going to have the recipe linked for you down below. Just keep in mind the amounts that I'm doing is double. So it calls for 4 tablespoons of brown sugar, which is a 1/4 cup. So I'm doing a 1/2 cup. Next is 1 teaspoon of cinnamon, 6 tablespoons of water, which would mean for doubling it, we're going to do a 3/4 cup of water, and then 2 teaspoons of vanilla. And I always like to add a bit more. I actually did 3. Now we're going to turn the heat on And it's been a little while because this lasts me for quite a while, actually. I don't have my small spatula, I guess it's in the sink. So we're going to stir this frequently until the sugar has completely dissolved and the syrup has thickened slightly. About 3 to 5 minutes is what the recipe says. It usually takes me a bit longer than that. And I want to make sure the cinnamon is fully combined. I think I'll take out my whisk actually. You're not going to like the noise, so I won't keep it for very long. I'll bring you guys back when I'm done with a whisk. Okay, I think the cinnamon is, all of it is declumped already, or whatever the right word for that would be. So you actually want this to come up to a simmer. And then you lower the heat and you let it cook for 3 to 5 minutes until it's thickened. Okay, so let's let it come up to a simmer now. Okay, we're gonna lower the heat a little bit and let this go for 3 to 5 minutes. Okay, I'm gonna call it for this. I'm gonna turn off the heat and I'm gonna remove it from the stove top and let it cool before we transfer it into our little bottle here that I use when I make the coffee. So the last and final thing we're prepping is our burger buns. So to start that, I melted a 1/4 cup of butter, which is still pretty hot. But I'm gonna get that in here, along with 3/4 cup of warm water, which I put in a bunch more here than I need. And the recipe does give me gram measurements, so I have this on the scale. Almost there, 20 more grams. Perfect. Now I don't want to add the starter to this very hot ingredients. So we're going to first add our other ingredients, which we're going to start with. I think I want to do gram measurements today, but my flour is pretty empty and I doubt this is enough. So let me refill this first. The reason why I want to do gram measurements is because we've been doing so many things today and I already washed a sink full of dishes and I already have a sink full again. So by measuring it out, I can limit the amount of dishes the amount of dirty dishes I create. And we're gonna put in 3/4 cup, sorry, not a 3/4 cup, 3 cups or 420 grams. That is good. Next, I'm gonna add 3 tablespoons of honey, and that I just squeeze in, measure it by eye. 1 teaspoon of salt, 1 egg, and last we'll add 100 grams of our active starter. And with all the dishes that I did earlier, I already washed our jar that I keep my sourdough starter in. So we can transfer this back into the jar that we usually keep it in. Let me just make sure, because I put it in, usually I add the ingredients according to the list of how it's listed in the recipe. But because I did it in a different order now, let me review it and make sure that I got everything inside. We're gonna mix this and beat it until it's a nice smooth dough, probably about 10 minutes. Okay, this dough is ready. Before I remove that from the mixer bowl, let me actually spray this bowl with some oil. It's a beautiful dough. I don't remember if I told you guys, but this is buns for this will be buns for our chicken sandwiches. So because it's going to be for chicken, I used a dairy-free butter for this. Now that this is in here, I'm going to spray the top with some oil. I'm going to cover this with some plastic wrap And I'm gonna cover it with a towel as well. And now we let this rest for 8 hours. So for me, that means overnight. So I'll see you guys in the morning. And actually, I forgot, before I go to sleep, I am going to transfer our syrup into our bottle here. I'm gonna use a funnel to avoid messes. It is now the next morning and it's time to shape the buns. So we're starting off by preparing a baking sheet, lined it with parchment paper. I am going to get the dough out of the bowl onto the clean counter. And at this point the dough is so nice and soft and fluffy, and it's such a good dough. And I think it came out the best dough that I've ever made for these burger buns. And I think it's because I weighed the flour instead of measuring it by cup. Once I have the So it's something to note for the future. Once I have the dough on the counter, I'm rolling it into a log, and then I cut it and divide it into 8 equalish pieces. It's not exactly equal, um, but if you want to be more accurate, you can weigh out the dough ball, see how much it is, divide that in 8, and then measure out 8 equal weighted dough balls and use that. Once I have the 8 separate pieces, I take one piece at a time. I bring the dough onto itself. I pinch it together at what would be the bottom afterwards, and I get it into a nice tight ball. Once I do that, I then roll it onto itself. I use my thumb and my pinky and I roll it onto itself until it's nice and tight. And then I flatten it out because I want it to be a bigger bun instead of a taller, like, roll. And I'm going to repeat that with all of my remaining dough balls until I get it all done. Once it is done, I am going to cover it with a plastic wrap and the towel, and we're going to let it rest until it has grown nicely. Okay, so this has rested for a nice long time. So I removed the plastic wrap. Now I need to crack an egg because I want to put an egg wash on top of this with some sesame seeds. Last night when I took the focaccia out of the oven, I realized I forgot to put salt on top, which, if you're going to just eat it as focaccia, just as a bread, and dip it into oil or a salad or something, you would want to have that salt and other toppings probably, like herbs and stuff. Roasted garlic would be delicious. But because we're going to have it as a sandwich with so many other flavors, I'm not upset about it. I mean, I am upset because it's just so much better with the salt. But it's not the end of the world. It'll still be delicious. We're going to brush the tops of these buns, with the egg wash. I'm going to sprinkle some sesame seeds over top. Don't need a lot. And this is going to bake in a 350-degree oven for 25 to 30 minutes. Our timer just went off and our buns are ready to come out of the oven. Now I want this to cool the quickest possible because I want to cut them in half and freeze them, and I don't have all day to stay here and babysit it until it cools. So remove it from the pan, it's going to cool off faster. Okay guys, so this has cooled enough. So what we're going to do now is, because I am going to freeze them to help them defrost faster, I am going to cut them in half. And like this, it's also ready to be eaten. one less step to have to do the day of. Got a bag here. I'm gonna get these in here. Now guys, if you want to see how I take all of these food items that we prepped in today's video, and you want to see how I make it into a full dinner, then consider subscribing, and I hope to see you there.